días. Una vez más, buenos días.
Buenos días.
Muy bien. El español es el idioma más hablado en los Estados Unidos después del inglés. Hoy existen alrededor de 57 millones de hispanohablantes que representan el 18% de la población. Básicamente, hay más hispanohablantes en los Estados Unidos que en España y que en Perú. How many of you understood what I just said? I want to see the hands, please. Let's see. Chris, what did I say?
There's as many Spanish speakers in the United States, but there's more Spanish speakers in the United States than there are in Spain and Peru.
So, what I said was that Spanish is the language most spoken in the United States after English. Today, we have 57 million Spanish speakers, which represent 18% of the population. Basically, there are more Spanish speakers in the United States than in Spain or Peru. If you have been my student, chances are you have heard me saying something similar to this on your first day of class. I also might have asked you, why did you sign up to learn Spanish? Your answers varied from, my parents wanted me to, I already took it in middle school, so I'm familiar with it, or I had to take a language. I ask this question every year because I want you to understand what's in it for you. Today, I will talk to you about why I think it will open your horizons and expose you to different cultures. Why I believe a second language will increase your opportunities to get a job in the future. And how the study of language will give you a chance to learn more about yourself. I began to learn English in Peru when I was in kindergarten until I was a senior in high school. So I know what it takes to learn a language. It is definitely not easy, but it completely changed my life. And I think it could also change yours. So here's how my journey in bilingualism started. An old lady fell off her bed in a hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio. Nurse Charlie, my mom, immediately came to the rescue and called the resident doctor on duty, Luis, my dad. They met, fell in love, got married, and I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. Once my dad finished his residency program, we moved to Peru for the next 20 years, where my 3 sisters were born. Life was great. I loved living in Peru. I went to Villa Maria Academy, an American girls' school in Lima, which I attended from kindergarten until I was a senior in high school. I loved my school, my friends, my big Peruvian family. However, there was one difficult thing for me. My sisters and I were the only girls in the school that had an American mother. At that age, I wanted to be like my friends. Why could my mom be Peruvian, like all the other moms? She spoke to me in English everywhere we went, no matter how many times I begged her to please speak to me in Spanish. She loved the United States with all her heart and missed it terribly. So she was going to try with everything she could to pass those sentiments to her daughters and she was adamant that we would learn English. I remember asking her one day how she had married a man from a different country. I told her that I could never do that.
Too late.
I had it very clear. I was going to marry a Peruvian and live with my husband and kids in Peru for the rest of my life. How she kept her calm during the remarks of a fresh teenager, I don't know. But I remember her responding to me, "You never know, Lil, this could happen to you," which I completely dismissed and thought it made no sense. Boy, was I naive. Fast forward 30 years. I remember this particular day when I was picking up my 3 kids from school. Alessandra was in 7th grade, Paul was in 4th grade, and Isabella was in 1st grade. Paul burst into tears in the car. He said that his friends had told him that I had an accent. And that was not true. You don't have an accent, Mom. Alessandra said her friends had also told her that before, but she didn't care. She thought they were wrong. Isabella was so confused. She said, "What? Mom has an accent?" She hadn't even noticed it. I had to explain to them that of course I have an accent and I love it. Because when people hear it, they ask me where I'm from, and I tell them that I'm from Peru. And I'm so proud of it. I totally understood what they felt. I had experienced those same feelings myself. In essence, I had become my mom in reverse. I always spoke to them in Spanish, and as they got older, they also asked me to speak to them in English. But like my mom, I didn't listen. I took them to Peru as many times as I could because I wanted them to see my world, know their Peruvian family, and speak the language well. For the first time, I understood how my mother felt. It was more important to her that I learn a second language than my insecurity of wanting to fit in. And without even noticing, I was following in her footsteps. I discovered that the hidden reason for me to teach my children Spanish was that I wanted to have something in common with them. Spanish would be the part of their identity that came from me. I'm sure my mom felt the same way. It always amazes me to see your accomplishments in Spanish, which is why I recommend that you continue to study the language in college and seriously consider the possibility of getting a major or a minor. I also explained to you that the advantage of having a major or a minor in Spanish is that you can actually put it in your resume and increase your job opportunities. Being fluent in Spanish will give your interviewer very important insight about yourself. It shows that you are a global citizen that realizes the importance of communicating with more people in whichever career path you choose to follow. As Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart." The need for Spanish speakers is growing in this country in different sectors, such as financial, healthcare, legal, and education, among others. If you were competing for a position with people with similar background and education, I think that your resume showing your bilingualism would stand out. When I was in my first year of college at University of Lima, the shining path a terrorist group in Peru, and the biggest in South America, was gaining more territory and were beginning to do more terrorist attacks in Lima, where I lived. For our safety, my parents decided to move back to the United States. We arrived in Sarasota, Florida in January of 1987. I was 20 years old and I did not know a soul. I remember feeling so lonely. Every time the phone rang, I knew it could not be for me because nobody knew me. But I knew the English language and I had a plan. I was going to transfer from University of Lima to Boston University, and I was going to work and save money because my parents were beginning a new life and had 4 daughters that needed to continue their education. And that was the only thing that mattered. Before I started college, I was fortunate to get a job as a waitress at one of the best restaurants in Sarasota. Being bilingual helped me a lot because I was able to speak in Spanish to the employees who worked in the kitchen and in English to all the customers. I worked hard that year and got accepted into Boston University School of Management. During my years in college, my English got better, and I was able to get summer internships at Cambridge Trust and at Smith Barney, which eventually led me to a job opportunity at Southeast Bank in Miami. The fact that I knew Spanish was the key reason I got the job, because Spanish is the main language in Miami. Afterwards, I moved back to Boston and worked for Putnam Investments in the dealer marketing area. I was an inside wholesaler, and my territories were California, Texas, and Arizona. There was beginning to be a need for Spanish speakers because the financial consultants in those states had Spanish-speaking clients. I also serviced the 401k plan department by giving presentations in Spanish to employees that did not speak English regarding the different mutual funds that were offered in their plan. At that time, little did I know that 10 years later, my bilingualism was going to lead me into a different career path, one in which I would discover my true passion, teaching. I never imagined that I would ever be a teacher. And as I think more about this, I actually think that teaching found me. One summer morning in 2005, I received a phone call from a woman who said that she had heard that I was Peruvian and spoke Spanish. She wanted to know if I would be interested in teaching Spanish at Meritor Academy. She invited me to come to her office to talk more about it, and after our conversation, I accepted the position to teach Spanish to 2- and 3-year-old toddlers for 10 hours a week. I told my friends about my new job, and they immediately asked me to also teach their children who were in elementary school, and some are here. The plan was that they would come to my house after school for an hour. I started with a class of 5 students, which grew into 4 classes of 5 students in each. Since I really enjoyed my first year of teaching Spanish, I thought that maybe a career in education would be my next step. So I decided to get a master's in education. During the summer of 2006, I called the Graduate School of Education at Merrimack College to ask about a master's in education with a concentration in Latin American studies. The lady explained that they had a master's in education, but not the concentration in Latin American studies. So I thanked her for her time, and right before we hung up, she quickly said, "You have an accent. Where are you from?" I told her that I was from Peru, and she said that they were looking for a Spanish teacher. at Merrimack College, okay, where I was applying to get a master's. I told her that I was from Peru, and she asked me to send her my resume, and she asked if I could please email her my resume, which I did. And she invited me to interview for that position. After the interview, she offered me the job of adjunct professor of Spanish. I could not believe what was happening to me. But I was ready for the ride and eager to see where this would take me. To top it off, that same summer, I also received a phone call from Mr. Packard. He had heard about me from a member of the faculty at Brooks and offered me a part-time position to teach a Spanish 1 class here at Brooks. In the meantime, I had also been accepted to Boston College to pursue a master's in education with a concentration in Latin American studies. At this point, I was certain I had to follow this path. Fortunately, Mr. Packard offered me 2 classes in 2007 and a full-time position in 2008. And the rest is history. Bilingualism has shaped my life. I have wondered what would have happened to me if I didn't know English when I arrived to the United States. Would I have been able to go to college and later work in business? The same for Spanish. The need for Spanish speakers in the United States led me to a career in teaching, and I discovered my passion. To all of you, learn another language and broaden your horizons, because the knowledge of another language will enrich your life. And who knows what you will discover in your bilingualism journey. Thank you.